Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Man on Second podcast. As always, I am your host, Eric Wiedeke, and I am also joined, as always, by Joe Frisaro. Uh, Felt like a little bit of a letdown today. A lot of anticipation kind of coming into today's game. Um, you had the chance to take one, 3 out of 4 against a team that you're gonna be in the wild card race against, and that ultimately they came up short today, losing 5-1. Uh, just can't get over that hump, huh, Joe?
Yeah, Eric. Yeah, frustrating one. And just so people know, we're recording this on Sunday, so at the night of the game. Yeah, Eric, this is what really hit me. They haven't won back-to-back games since May, 19th and or
Oh wow.
17th and 18th. I think it is. I think that, or excuse me, May 16th and 17th. That was the last time they won back-to-back games, and that was the homestand when they beat the Nationals. The first two had a chance for a sweep and lost that third game. And back then they were 17 and 19. Now after losing on Sunday, splitting the 4 games with San Francisco, we're looking at a Marlins team that's what eight under, 23 and 30, excuse me. And as noted, the Giants are 29 and 24. They're 5 over. Leaving town. Marlins are off on Monday, and yeah, you had a chance to kind of make a statement, take 3 of 4, especially after an emotional comeback win yesterday, coming back, meaning Saturday, coming back from 4 runs down on a Pablo Lopez start when Pablo wasn't at his finest. Gutsy game there. Couldn't follow it up.
Yeah, I mean, it really felt like this game was going to be, and I don't want to make it more than it is. It's 1 out of 162. Uh, but it just felt like symbolically there was something there today. And it was just really disappointing to see the win taken out of their sails so early, to go down 4-0 again. Uh, and the way that they were at the plate today, there was, I mean, they went down 4-0, and you kind of had a feeling they just didn't have that same comeback in them today. Uh,
Yeah,
I don't really know. At least for today's game, that's kind of my takeaway from it.
yeah. Obviously it's emotional. Walk-off win on Saturday. A lot of good things happened. They picked up Pablo. Pablo gutted it out, went 7 innings. Cooper with a big hit. He's super hot. We're going to talk about him later on in the show today. Sanchi with a really good approach with second and third in the ninth inning with 2 strikes, I believe, to elevate the baseball and get a sacrifice fly to win the game. The whole first walk off of the year, the helmet, the football helmet, trying to generate energy and excitement. So, you know, they're looking and scratching for something to hang their hat on and give them traction. So what do? You come out, on Sunday. We didn't really know what to expect from Braxton Garrett, but you knew that the Marlins had a game that they had some momentum coming into. If they could kind of pull that one off, take 3 out of 4, make a little bit of a statement against a tough NL West opponent. Uh, yeah, and especially with the Nationals coming to town for 3 more games. So this was, I felt, a real crucial 4 game stretch to try to get it as close to 500 before to go into Houston later in the week and a road trip that's going to be a little more daunting. And again, I think right now, Eric, and you could get angry, you could get emotional, and I'm like, if I'm evaluating this, what am I looking? I think what we always try to do on Man on Second, we take a lot of pride in being as honest and as accurate, and our evaluations are really pretty much spot on. And we don't like to oversell, we don't want to undersell, we want to be fair and shoot it straight. But I really think the organization's got to be really asking itself how they've evaluated themselves, because a lot of organizations spend a lot of time checking out their own organization to find out what really they have. And whenever you talk to everybody in the organization, you'd think this is a team right there knocking on the door to be the best team in baseball. And I like to see a little bit. Yes, I'm not expecting them to say we're not that good, but I think right now you got to be kind of honest where you are 8 under, 6.5 out for the final third wild card spot. Basically, the only teams behind you are, like they're like in a 15-team league. I think they're like 13th.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're right there. And so when you ask yourself, now, granted, there is still time because we're 2 months in. You got the trade deadline August 2nd. You basically got 7 weeks to get as close to 500 as possible, and even that may not be good enough. But that might mean whether you buy or sell.
Right.
And to me, I don't see anything. I don't see anything to say buy, because that's you only buy when you're there to go to the playoffs, not to be the third wild card, especially giving up assets. So I think you're kind of boxed in where you're going to have to kind of run out there with what you got. And yes, you might make big league trade for big league trade. I'd be for that. But anything at a prospect to go for it, a rental or whatever, especially when you're going to have, everybody in the National League is going to be doing the same thing. You're going to have to be really smart in how you kind of navigate this and really objective on what you want to do with this season.
Yeah, I don't see any scenario, at least right now. Obviously, June 5th, things can change. It's a long season. At the moment, I don't see anything that indicates to me that they're going to be buyers. Um, I don't see, as far as like from an organizational standpoint in terms of their evaluation. The Marlins have prided themselves on creating really solid organizational depth this year. That was their buzzword. That's what they wanted to go for. I think you need to evaluate. Okay, well, who are our core pieces going forward? It's going to be Sandy. I'd like to see them get something done long term ish with Pablo. Um, at least as if he continues the way that he's pitching right now. Um, and then from there, it's kind of all bets are off. Uh, Jazz is probably the one guy as a position player that you want to say can be part of that core. But from there, it's like, okay, well, now we need to shift to who presents us more value out of the organization than in the organization. What I mean by that is, can we extract more value from these players by dealing them than by keeping them on the roster?
Very well
Because
said.
it
Real
be
said. Finish.
yeah, because you're looking at guys like, and obviously you and David have the prospects covered very well. But you've got guys like Lewin and Gerard. If the season goes sideways, you want to at least see what you have from those guys, right?
Mhm.
And not just in September, because September is kind of wacky. You get performances that maybe might not bear out as much uh truth as something that you might see in July or August or a multi-month span.
Yeah, and it leads me when you're talking about this, um, Eric, to something that I've kind of preached hard about, this whole pitching surplus. Oh, they got all this great pitching, and they do. They're very comparatively to other organizations. The Marlins are in a very envious position, but that shouldn't be taken that you just have all these interchangeable pieces and they're all ready and they're all healthy and they're all performing all at the same time. Because right now, I think Brax was what, their seventh or so different starter this year.
Yep.
You're going to need, and I've told people this, you need 10 to 14 over the course of a full year, because that's usually what happens. Because guys go down. Eliezer, had his issues. He got sent down. Braxton Garrett came up. We're going to talk about Braxton in a minute. But, you didn't have Jake Eater. You knew this year you didn't have Sixto Sanchez, at least from day one. And, you didn't have your plan for Max Meyer never really was involved that he could potentially help your club as a reliever. That was even in spring training. They wanted to groom him as a starter. So even if they thought of moving Max to the pen, they never really put a plan in place to do that. So they basically said Max is going to be a starter. Well, Max is down right now on the IL with a little bit of forearm, elbow, whatever they wanted to, exactly call it. But, you have to be really careful with him. And while a month ago we were screaming, get him up here, now if you're not as close as you think you are, I'm not rushing him. I'm not rushing Max Meyer. I'm super careful with Max Meyer. Jesus Luzardo's been out since May 10th, hasn't picked up a baseball since. So I'm not rushing him either. So now you need where's your help? And this gets
Right.
us to the strength of the organization without question is their starting pitching. And Yuri Perez is lighting it up in Double A. He ain't coming up this year, nor should he. You hope to have Eater back next year. You hope to have Edward, progressing to being really good. And that could be it, because what could save this season would be whatever combination is Sandy, Pablo, Edward. And if Trevor Rogers doesn't straighten it out, then you're basically got 3 out of 5, 3 out of 5 days you got a shot, and you better win those 3. And that's really not where you want to be. So I think you gotta have to be realistic to say, look, let's just try to forget the win-loss record, forget the standings, forget the spring training mantra of no excuses. Just make sure there's no sideways or backwards with Pablo, Sandy. Get Trevor on track and see if you can build Edward, because certainly in Colorado, he looked like as advertised. And, we want to see Edward growing. So I think you got to have to kind of, and I want to make this point clear too. And I understand the fan base's frustration, and no one knows it more than me. 20 years on this beat, I probably have covered more losses than any active, BBWA member over a 20-year period. Granted, I had a World Series in there, a couple of winning seasons, but a lot of losing. And it's not these players' fault, the losing and the frustration of the fans. And they don't need any extra pressure. They need to become who they are. The fan base can deal with whatever, but it's like, it doesn't matter, to Jazz, if he's in a slump, that a lot of people's feelings are hurt because for 10 years or 20, 15 years, they haven't been as good as they should have been. So we have to evaluate the 2022 Marlins realistically and not hold them to, well, they're due to win. Yes, that would have been the ideal situation, but that's not how it came out. So going forward, are we going to break the pitching? Because it's all about the pitching. You have no shot without it. So if Edward Cabrera isn't right, if Pablo doesn't hold up over 162 or whatever, this is what matters. And any outside noise is just that.
Yeah, I mean, and you said it really well. It's not necessarily the players, I think if anything, where I think the frustration comes from, and where I think the fair place to approach the frustration from is like you kind of mentioned earlier, when you're alluding to, you talk to people inside of the organization, and they make it sound like they're at the top of the division in the standings.
Yeah, them and the Dodgers are right there.
Yeah, and that's a little frustrating, because it makes you wonder how honest they are in their own evaluation, which is, a question for another day. But when looking at this team, I think anybody that's looking from the outside in knows that, maybe if things would have broken their way a little bit better, they'd still be in the playoff hunt, and they're not completely out of it yet, but they're a lot closer to out of it than in it at this point. And so you kind of have to start approaching the season. You have to start looking at the season from a different angle.
Yeah, no doubt. And, look, everyone liked to blame Eliezer. You're like, if your worst headache is your 5th starter, and I don't care if he pitched game 4, he's their 5th starter in terms of, the guy who, in terms of ability, and we'll take Luzardo out of the equation because that was an injury. But, he's getting beaten up, to the point where you could see it, the confidence finally went. Well, now you got Braxton Garrett here. And, let's break down Braxton today. Yeah. And I like Brax. He's got value, but he's a similar profile from the left side as Eliezer. And what you notice is 72 pitches and 3 1/3, while he had some strikeouts, and he executes some really good sliders against a, predominantly lefty lineup, do some really good pitches. But guys without, real electric stuff take a lot of pitches to get outs. And that's what Eliezer got in trouble with. You may get strikeouts. You might carve a guy up eventually 8 pitches in and strike him out. But 72 pitches for 3 1/3, 27 sliders, 15 four-seam fastballs.
Yep.
You know, so it's like he's pitching backwards. He's going to be doing that stuff. So now again, he gives up the grand slam. And what was the knock on Eliezer? All the home runs. So you give up the grand slam in 3 1/3 innings, and you're going to have to parade him out there in 5 days or 6 days, however it breaks because of the off day. But he's got to get back out there. And how are you going to resolve that? Where are the expectations going to be? This is a 5, 6, 7 inning pitcher. Or, I've preached a lot about, and I admire them for doing the opener with Eliezer in his last thing, with Richard Blyer opening and Eliezer followed. But I've been big on that to somehow form a plan for a shorter inning start guy, because you have the 14th pitcher to the pretty much end of June. You can almost have to navigate games like that. And if you get 5, 6 from Brax, great. But you almost have to have a plan for that, not just wake up and say, oh my gosh, you're the long guy today or whatever. And I'm not saying they don't have plans, but I just think their plans are more under the traditional, you got 5 starters and we're going to run out 5 starters in a more traditional 5-starter role.
Yeah, I think with Braxton, and to your point, I think he did pitch overall pretty well today.
Well, out of hand was pretty good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. My one concern with him is, and to your point, it's going to tie in a little bit with how deep he can go into games. He got to that 4th inning, and all of a sudden the fastball wasn't 93 anymore; it was 89, 90. And that's where I think that's where I looked at it, and from the very beginning of the inning I said, because he needs his stuff to be at 100% if he's going to be, if he's going to get through 5 or 6 innings. He's not going to be a guy like Pablo that cannot, have it all the way and still go 7. That's just not realistic for a guy like Brax. That said, see if you can build him up a little bit more. If he gets more, if he's able to get deeper into games, your hope, if you're not using an opener with him, is just get through 5.
Yeah.
Just give me 5 innings, 1 run, 2 runs. I don't really need much more else from him.
Yeah. Yeah. And, as we're saying on the rotation, we'll get off it in a second, but
yeah.
I really think, though, the way to crawl back, okay, the solution, we know the problem, people have seen it and we're hearing it. So what's the solution? To me, the way you get back in it, we see it every 5th day with Sandy Alcantara, the ability to go 9, on an off day to go 7, it's like he's been remarkable. And, how promising as Edward was and Pablo, well, you got, you're going to need that. But I think the key is going to be Edward, in a lot of ways. And it's going to be fun because he's a really talented, pitcher. I mean, 93.6 was his average changeup velocity in that, with a max at 95.5. For perspective, Eliezer Hernandez's 4-seam fastball averages 91.4. So, obviously different cat, different animal coming at hitters. The reaction time, you could just see it. You could see, look around the league, these closers who aren't missing bats, how they're doing. You've got to miss bats, and you do it with big velo. And, 97 was Edwards' 4-seam fastball average in that first start. So, he's going to be big. Sandy's going to be big. Pablo's going to be big. So you can still string together and win series.
Yeah.
Moving forward in the next month. You have to win 8 in a row to get back in it. But if you take 2 of 3, win 3 of 4, you start taking some series, and they do still have at the top of the rotation the type of pitchers that could get it done. So again, that's my silver lining for them to get back in this, closer into the wild card race.
Yeah, and to your point, my positive with Edward, was how deep he was able to go into the game, versus Colorado. He threw 98 pitches, which was very encouraging to me in his first start, which really tells me, there wasn't much building up that had to be done with him. So he's kind of, if he's got it, you just let him go until he can't. at this point. Obviously, you don't want to, overexert him, run him out there like he's Sandy, but he's good to go 95 to 100 pitches on any given night. The big thing for the rotation for me is if Trevor's gonna get it back together. Because if Trevor can, then obviously then you have that third guy in the rotation. I think
Fourth
it's
guy.
fourth guy,
Yeah.
depending on Edward, depending on
Yeah.
Edward.
Yeah.
But if Edward, you can't expect him to be what he was in Coors every start. But if he can be good, and Trevor can get himself to be good, then I think, yeah, you've got yourself a shot to kind of crawl back into this. One game at a time, one series at a time.
Yeah, yeah. And one last thing with Edward, and the thing about it is they seem to feed off Sandy Edward, especially because they're similar size. They're similar. In stature, similar type of arsenal. And what I really liked about Edward was just the attacking of the zone. But that's the difference. A guy like Brax can't be in the middle of the
Right.
zone. But Edward can miss in the middle of the plate, and it doesn't matter sometimes because it's 98 to 100. And and with that movement, throw it down the middle. That thing may dip and sail with sinkers and changeups and then sliders. You're just the reaction time is but that is the attack mode that I liked. A lot of strike ones I liked that. Yeah, I know he hit some guys and walked some guys, but what did he have? One hit, I think it was,
Yeah.
or whatever. So yeah, it's not always going to look that great, in terms of the result. But again, that's the silver lining. I think that if you're Marlin, the Marlin fans, that's the thing we could hang our hat on. That the rotation, if it just clicks, and like you say, if Trevor comes on board, that's how you make the run out of it, because there's still a ton of games to be played, no doubt. But on the offensive side, which is funny because I was telling you before we hit the live button, I was more concerned right now with the rotation, meaning the durability and the stability of it, than the offense. And the key to the offense right now, or the hottest hitter, one of the hottest hitters in baseball, is Garrett Cooper. And I know the last 7 games in 429, last 15, 418, last 30, 324. But I got some other numbers I want to drop at you as
Yeah.
well, because I look at Coop because I still like to see more power, but he has this approach. I've had conversations with him about it, and he said to me that he missed a lot of time last year. That he's just getting back. He's trying to get the at bats back, the feel, the timing, everything, and eventually it should surface. We're starting to see more of it. OPS is really good. The Oppo homer, really easy power there. But in terms of heading into today, now it'll all update tomorrow, but pretty good indicator. Coop was the 10th best among all. I looked at Fangraphs. Fangraphs wore all first basemen that qualified. He was 10th overall in first baseman with a 1.1 F WAR. And Paul Goldschmidt's having like an MVP year.
Yeah.
He's got a 2.8. He's hitting 342. And this in the American League, Ty France, who homered today, he's hitting like 335. He had a 2.0 WAR. Freddie Freeman has a 2.0 WAR. Those 3 guys are kind of like the top end of first base in the big leagues. But what really stands out to me with Coop is the BABIP. It would rise today, but going into today, 387. League average about 300.
Yeah.
So he puts the ball in play, he reaches. So is he sustainable there? And I give up a little bit of on base for slugging and overall, because I'd rather him, because I think what's going to happen if you're down 4-1, 5-1, they'll pitch to him, let him hit a homer. And if the game's on the line, if Solaire's going to swing and miss as much as he is, they're going to walk him. And then he's going to have to adjust to being pitched around.
Yeah, and I'm gonna and I'm sure this is, I'd like to see Cooper. I to your point, he's been fantastic. Like you said, I think the power's coming along too. We have started to see it. Um, I would like to see him, and I know what the numbers say about when he hits in the 2 spot, what his average is, and all that. Man, I'd like to see him get the opportunity, 3, 4, 5. I'd like to get him as many at bats with runners on base as possible. because right now, the guys that they have in those spots aren't necessarily getting the job done. And I know Cooper's profiles as a really good on base guy. He's going to over 400 on base. That's great. I'd like to see him in that heart of the order spot where you can get guys on in front of him.
Yeah, and look, we're nitpicking on the guy who's been super hot, and this is the approach that's working for him. So we'll
Yep.
see how it grows out. But just an example to your point on that, a lot of times you'll see a 2-0 count, where to me it's like now's the time to look to do damage, not take a strike. You know what I mean? Because sometimes you get a fat pitch and you might take it. And 4 home runs is from first baseman you want much more. And I know he's DH too, but we're looking at him in the first base profile in this exercise. But that's what I'm saying. I like to see that, but again, it's what's working. And if that's him, but right now he's more of that get the party rolling. It was good to see the 2-out, 2-out RBI. And like you said, when he had the second and third on Saturday and tied the game up and they eventually win it. You're right. I like to see him in those spots and see him be maybe pick a pitch or two to be a little more aggressive. But again, what's working is what's working, and you are who you are. And I've seen a lot of guys go the other way, trying to do something that they're not completely comfortable with. But he's on the high end, really fun to watch right now, and really, kind of the guy carrying the middle. I see Sanchez doing a bit too. On the flip side, Jazz, still among all second basemen, 1.7 F WAR. He's still their best player this year, and that's third among second basemen. Different profile because he's a table setter who also has power. But just as we were talking about Coop's BABIP being almost 400, 380 something, which will go up when Fangraphs revises itself. Jazz's BABIP is 288 and he's hitting 250, so he's actually under that average, but still 815 OPS, 8 homers, 31 RBIs. But I was telling you this as we were prepping. Jazz hasn't looked the same since the hammy thing. In that when was it, about May 20 something? And I think in the 7 games since he's played, because he missed like 4 or so games. I think he came back on the 29th. He missed some 4 games or so, but he's like hitting 077. Just 2 for 26 and 29 plate appearances, 3 stolen bases, a homer, 4 RBIs, but just not the same Jazz. I know he had been kind of sliding a little bit before that, but a guy who relies on his legs and everything, he seems to be out of sorts right now.
Yeah, and it's and Jazz has had this, and I don't know if this is the case, but Jazz has admitted in the past, there's certain things that when the game isn't going right for him in one aspect, it'll affect him, in other aspects of the game. And so you have to wonder if, and I'm sure a guy like him that does rely on his legs, he's frustrated because you want to play at your full ability, and you just hope for him that it's not impacting him anywhere else. It's not changing his approach at the plate or anything like that. For example, today's at bat, he pinch hits for Luke Williams.
Yeah.
Jazz is normally pretty aggressive in the box, and so for me, seeing him take that first pitch right down the middle, that's a pitch that I'm accustomed to seeing Jazz, at least take a shot at. He's a guy that's not afraid to swing, at the first pitch. And so you kind of have that question of, with, if he's not 100%, is he playing kind of with that reckless abandon that he normally plays with, that that kind of that edge that makes him as good as he is when he is at his best.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think he took a strike 3 in that, and it looked like a good pitch, and he was disputing with the umpire. Maybe it was frustration. I think if when he went back and looked at it, he would see it indeed was strike 3. But you're right. It was a more passive. It wasn't the Jazz, game on the line type of thing. Here's my moment. And I wonder, because sometimes, he'll let it go on his swing. I wonder if that leg, I think it's the left hammy, I think it is, which is his pivot, turn on
Yeah.
the swing. I just wonder if that's completely where it should be. But again, something to monitor. Again, it just hasn't looked right. Granted, guys are going to be playing bruised, bumped and bruised. Cooper had the little intercostal strain or tightness, whatever you want to call it. More tightness and strain. Strain would be an injury, and he's come back, looking super from that. He missed a day or so in Colorado, but guys got to learn to play with through some discomfort, because it's a long year and we're not even
Right.
How many games are we in? I'm not even
50 or
50
yeah.
games.
Yeah.
There's like 110 to go, and it's not going to get easy. This isn't 2020. I think some of the younger fans got spoiled with 2020, thinking it's a 60-game season. No, there's a lot of baseball to be played, and yeah, you got to know your body, you got to know your pace. Again, I am happy with what I'm seeing with Sanchi. I think he's
Yep.
starting to play through some of that adjustment. Maybe Jazz would do it. I think we got to give Miggy Rojas some love on the podcast. He's starting to become Miggy again in terms of some productive hits. But yeah, John Birdie scratching. They're fighting again. I think obviously the big guys, the big free agent signings are disappointing. More Garcia than Soler, but still, just and that's what, to your point back with Cooper, it's like you could easily pitch around him because Garcia is going to swing at a first pitch if it's in the other team's dugout or not, because he's so muscle memory to swing at the first pitch, and so he's made himself a lot easier to pitch to type of player. It's a frustrating time because this now is the time you kind of become who you are, and with the Marlins they're going to have to kind of regroup pretty fast, like I said, to salvage this year. And again, there's time to do it. And if unfortunately I wasn't able to get to the park this weekend. I've been doing some other assignments on other big league teams, and but I do plan on being out there this week against the Nationals. So I'll have a lot more, firsthand when I'm talking to people and hearing what they have to say. But one last thing, I just will wrap up. Tanner Scott looks real good in that late inning. I do like Okert. I could see Okert's closing too. I like that lefty, but I think that might have had more to do with them facing the Giants that are pretty lefty dominant. So we'll see how that plays out, but something to keep an eye on as they're looking for guys to lock down the 8th, 9th innings. So otherwise, not a lot to smile about right now, Eric, but it is a long season, and we're gonna keep breaking it down. We're gonna keep you telling what we think, what we know, and excellent points as also as always there, Eric. And tell people how they can find us as we wrap the show up.
Absolutely. So you can find us at the 5 Reasons Sports YouTube channel for all of our full-length podcasts. You can also find all of our commentary and follow us on Twitter. That's going to be at Man on Second Baseball. That's going to be at Man on Second Baseball on Twitter. We do have more podcasts upcoming. Obviously, Joe has his prospect podcast that he does with David Fernandez. Great work on that we do weekly here. And just before we leave, one just gonna tease something here, just a little bit of an eyebrow raiser for the rest of the season. I'm interested in how much playing time Nick Fortes is going to get as the season winds down. Just to kind of tease that.
That's interesting. Yeah, good point. Also, remind on the YouTube, hit the like, subscribe to the channel. Do all those good things. Again, take us out of here.
Absolutely. So we will see you guys next week. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.